Hey everyone, welcome. Happy to see you. Slowly folks will gather. Always happy to be able to spend some time together and then to study Torah. If you'd like to just check in where you are, where you're coming from, what's the weather like now here in New York? We had a bust of a Memorial Day weekend. Lots of rain and cold, and it's turning itself around to be a different kind of day today, which, that's the way it is. Sometimes it's like that, and sometimes it's like the other thing. And, at the end of May, we complain that it's 60 degrees, and in the thick of July, we'll say, why can't it be 60 degrees? It's just the way we are. We don't want it to be this way or that way. We want it to be just right. Welcome, Judith from Tallahassee. We delight in the fact that there are other planets in what they call, that is, the astroscientists, the folks who study worlds beyond ours, that there are planets in what we call the Goldilocks zone. Not too hot, not too cold, not too far from the sun, not too close to it. We generally say, oh, Goldilocks, not to this, not to that. That's the way it should be. And of course, it's kind of that way, I guess, in places like San Diego or Los Angeles, where it's always 70 degrees more or less, maybe 80. But it's never really the same. It's always changing from one day to the next, from moment to the next. We practice in order to be able to be with what is as it is, and to recognize when it's unpleasant, be able to say, oh, this is unpleasant, without making what's unpleasant wrong or bad, or make us wrong or bad for finding it unpleasant. It's simply unpleasant. And what we find pleasant to be pleasant, and to recognize, oh, this is very pleasant. And to know that however pleasant it is, it will also change. And to enjoy it for now, and to allow it to change without too much grief or complaint that the world shouldn't be that way. That'll be a piece of our study today, of how things change and how we engage with that as part of our spiritual lives. That not only do things change, and we should be aware of that fact, but that expecting change and participating in it is part of spiritual life. It is essentially what we're here to do, what we should anticipate as part of our experience in spiritual life. And then to be able to participate in that change in a manner that helps us to grow spiritually, to grow in awareness, to grow in consciousness of what actually is, and not to get trapped in like or dislike. So I think we can turn to our study, and always as we do, we begin with a bracha, Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. V'ha'arevna Adonai Eloheinu divrei Toratcha b'finu, v'niyeh anachnu v'kol amcha beit Yisrael, tzatzainu v'kol amcha beit Yisrael, kulanu yodei shemecha v'lomdei Toratcha lishma. May your words be pleasant in our mouth. And as I've suggested, our Rave suggests the woof, I think, the warp of the back and forth of a loom, the piece that passes back and forth. And I want to just stay with this, not so much of the weaving idea of it, but of that going back and forth. Right? If we didn't have that back and forth, moving from one side of the loom to the other, we'd just have strings. We wouldn't have cloth. And it requires that we move from left to right, and then move from right to left, and that we move slowly up the loom in order to create a piece of cloth. And that's part of our spiritual practice. So our text this week, comes from Ma'ayana Chochmah. We've studied from Ma'ayana Chochmah in the past. I included here that biographical note, Asher Tzvi of Ostraha and Koretz. So he died in 1777. That's 5 years after the death of the Maggid of Mezrich, who was his teacher. So we're still really early in the Hasidic movement. And he reflects an early level of this teaching, and very much, I think, reflects the teachings of his teacher, the Maggid, with his own particular twist. So he's going to key on the verse that comes at the end of the Torah portion this week, at the conclusion of the passage having to do with the tzitzit, the fringes that we're enjoined to put on the corners of our garments, which now that we don't wear togas or serapes for the most part, but rather the garments that we do, that we fulfill that mitzvah when we put on a talit and have the tzitziot, the fringes on the corners of our talit. That you not go wandering after, or seeking after, or searching after, or scouting after, or being distracted by, or being seduced even by our hearts and eyes, that we zonim acharehem, that we go whoring after. That's really what it says, right? So it really is that we are going to the red light district and we're looking for whatever it is that appeals to us sexually and want that instead of what we have at home. And we're looking for that which is going to give us a quick high. That's what the verse is saying. And we have the tzitziot on our garments so that when we touch them, when we see them, that we'll be reminded and therefore do all of God's commandments. And the Ma'ayana Chochmah is going to play with this idea of, one, being seduced by our heart and mind and eyes, And second, this idea of sitem et kol mitzvotai, that we will then be able to do all of God's commandments. And of course, today, this is a classic rabbinic statement that today we're not able to perform all of God's commandments because there is no temple, and therefore we can't fulfill commandments having to do with sacrifice. Many of us don't live in the land of Israel, so therefore we can't participate in the agricultural laws. The rules and regulations regarding the Kohanim and Leviim, the priests and Levites generally don't apply anymore. So how can we fulfill all of God's commandments? He's going to try to tackle these by weaving a really wild piece of tapestry. It seems to me, that the Torah is suggesting to us in this verse, that yirah, fear, is likened to fire, and ahava, love, is likened to water. And so fire we can understand more in the sense of the way we burn when we get angry. That is, we have this sense of constriction that comes up in our bodies when we are energized by that which is, to which we are aversive, that we are generating energy in that way, and in that way we experience fire. But ahava is expansive, and love can flow anywhere, at any time, to anyone. And so love is ahava, is water. And he uses these in recalling a rabbinic teaching on the verse from Job. Right? The one who serves God with yira and ava, with fear and love, hapnimit, right? The inner spiritual quality of fear and love. So again, it's not fear, external fear. It's not fear of punishment. It's not fear of the dog that barks in the night. It's not fear of the loud sound that happens outside our door. It's not fear of what's going to happen if the IRS audits my taxes, because after all, I've been upright for the most part. And if anything, it's just going to be a penalty. And so what? It's not that fear. It's rather yira that comes from the awareness of the immensity of the cosmos and the infinitesimal smallness that we recognize. And all of the sense of both gratitude and fear that comes from what it means to actually have anything in this world, that anything comes to us at all. And the love is that love, which is, how can I withhold my loving attention from anything when I am the constant recipient of that love? And that's how the love and fear work together. So if we have and serve God with this inner spiritual sense of fear and love, azai hayira va'avat trei re'in delamit parshin, then the fear and love become two loving companions that never separate. Then love and fear are constantly bound together. It's not one or the other, but they're constantly working with us. Right? In this inner fear, love is contained. That they both contain each other. And they're never separated, and they're always working with each other. Kamo esh v'mayim, like fire and water. Shem klulim zeh bazeh, that are combined one with the other. Wait, hold on a second. Fire and water are not combined one and the other. They don't contain each other. We understand them to be opposites. What's he talking about? V'zeu oseh shalom b'mamav. And here he quotes Job. God who oseh shalom b'mamav. God makes peace in the highest heights. What is this peace that God makes in the highest heights? It's that God brings peace between Esh and Mayim, between fire and water, and creates Shamayim, creates the heavens. God does this, but he says, Mishu omed b'roma she'olam, the one who stands at the heights of the world. That is, she'oved la'kodesh baruch hu b'yira ve'ava pnimiut, right? The person who serves God in this way, with this inner sense of love and fear, hu oseh shalom ben esh v'mayim. That person brings peace between fire and water, which are fear and love. That is, that inner sense of fear and love. So we have the capacity to reconcile opposites, to bring peace between these two seeming opposites, even of Yira and Ava, and for them to contain one another. But but we have to start with Yira. But as soon as we experience fear, love is born in us. And that love contains Yira as well. Therefore, as soon as Yira, as soon as we experience love, then a greater fear is born in us, one that's greater than the previous one. And that fear is also contains the love. And so therefore, Yachol lavo b'chol pam v'fam l'yira v'ava yetera. We can over and over again, from one moment to the next, go from fear and love, greater and greater experience of it. So we have to understand that this is not Yira that is pressing down on us, that is oppressive and squeezes us into nothingness, and love, which is expansive and allows us to expand like a balloon, but rather that this is a dynamic process that's going on in us always, and that we can grow in it, that our lives can be greater through it. And here, he brings in, seemingly out of left field, this idea, because he said, right, that out of that fear, love is born in us, and out of that love, fear is born in us. He then takes us to this idea based on the beginning of Parshat Tazria, chapter 12 of Leviticus, right in the purity code, right? A woman who gives birth and bears a son. The end of the verse is that she should be impure for 7 days and then for 30 days after that. But the rabbis read this verse, Isha kitazria, a woman who brings forth seed, v'yalda zachar, and bears a male child. And they riff on it and they say, Isha mazra'at tchila yalda zachar. If in the sexual act, a woman brings forth seed first, whatever they thought that meant, but later in medieval times, it becomes much more modern in the sense of, oh, really, in the sexual act, a woman should have some pleasure, and that her own natural fluids should be present and flow. And if that happens first, that is, if a woman actually experiences pleasure first, they said, then she'll bring forth a male child. And if the man brings forth seed first, she bears a female child. So here he's going to say, Isha nikrait Yirah. That is, female is identified with on the Kabbalistic spherotic chart on the left side, and the side of Yirah, of constriction, when Isha happens first, when Yirah happens first. And Yirah, right? And he has this proof text, Isha Yirah Tchet, right? A God-fearing woman from Eshet Chayil, from chapter 31 of Proverbs. So when we cleave to Yirah, to fear, first, Azah Yelda Zachar, then we bring forth, we bear great love, because love is on the right side, which is identified with male. So when we experience Yirah first, Ahava opens up. Shu b'chinat zachar. V'yesh koach ba'ota ahava lavo mimena el hira. But from that love, it's not for us to stay there and bask in this love. Oh, if love would last forever. No. But rather to grow from that love to deeper understanding of what it means to be alive, what it means to receive anything of this world, to be benefited in any way, to come to Yirah, to say, how can I merit this at all? Right. I'm stuck because I'm trying to remember the verse from Hallel. How shall I repay you, God, for all that you've given me? Right? How shall I repay you? And if we think about it, how can we repay anything for the boon of our life? And that's what the Yirah that grows from Ahava is. And in this way, in every moment will come from our fear to love with greater power. Aval ish mazriat chila, but if the male brings forth seed first, that is, if we cleave first to love, yoledet nekeva, yes, there will be some Yirah that will come from this, because they're combined one with the other. Mikol makom ein koach ba'ota Yirah laholid ahava yitera, right? That Yirah that comes from love first will not have the power to bear new love. And that's why he focuses on ish mazria tchila, rather doesn't go on to then say yoled zachar in the male conjugation of the verb. It's yoledet because that ahava remains female in a sense, that it is not able to bring forth new Yirah. And in this, I did this week offer you the a couple of the citations just so you can follow it. B'zeyadua. Okay, we dealt with this, right? This is a way. Isha mazrat chila, female brings forth seed first, right? When Yirah produces Ava, then the dynamic of Yirah and Ava can go on because it's a constant dynamic. But if ish mazriat chila, but if the male brings forth seed first, then it's stymied in some way. Okay, we dealt with that. We're going to bring in another image. Sefer Torah ein nikudot velot amim. In the Sefer Torah, there are neither vowel punctuation points nor ta'amim, the musical notation, the trope. Ella otiot, but only consonants, letters. Ella shadam tzarich lamshich ba'otiot nikudot v'ta'amim. But when we read Torah, we have to bring to it both the vowel points and the musical trope. the musical notation, Shezeh yirato va'avato, that is fear and love. So when we come to Torah study, we have to bring into it our dynamic of fear and love. And he spends more time on fear here. Shanukuda ramza al yirato, that the point suggests our fear. And here he jumps from the nikudot, which are the vowels, to the nikudot, which are these diacritical marks that appear every now and then throughout the Torah to indicate some alternative reading. And he quotes the Talmud, right? Nakud al ayo. So I'm just going to, right? So the angels came to Abraham and Sarah, but Sarah was in the tent listening from behind, and the angels, vayomru elav, the angels said to Abraham, and here's the word elav. But in the Torah, there are points, there are dots over the letters Aleph, Yud, Vav, Shebe elav, in the word elav. And it's taught. Rabbi Shimon ben Lazar Omer, Rabbi Shimon Lazar said, Kol makom shaktav rabala nekuda, every place where there are more letters than there are dots, these diacritical marks, you interpret the letters. The kan nekudot rabala ktav, but here the points are greater than the letters. There are more points because there are over 3 out of the 4 letters of Elav. Therefore, you interpret the points, which is to say that they also spoke to Sarah. They asked, they said to Abraham, Aye, Aleph Yud, hey, Sarah Ishtecha, where is your wife Sarah? So the rabbis interpret these 3 letters, Ayo, which can be seen as masculine, as male in some way. They asked Sarah, Va'ayo, Ish, right? Where is your man? Where is Abraham? So it wasn't just Abraham, it wasn't just Sarah, it wasn't just Abraham, it was Abraham and Sarah to whom they spoke. So, right, there are points, there are these dots over Ayo. And what is he saying? Ayo means where, right? The points indicate where. Hainu, shebechol davar tistakel Ayo HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Everywhere you look, you should be asking, where is God? Right? Everywhere you look, you should be asking, where is God? How is God in this? How do I sense God's presence in this? And the aspect of Yirah that he suggests is, how do I take for myself any material pleasure? Eino margish koach elokit, but I don't sense the power of divinity in this thing. How do I separate this material world from divinity that enlivens it, that produces it, that sustains it from moment to moment? Now, when we ask ourselves this question, when we're constantly looking to see where God is, how God is present in everything, then we constrict ourselves into a point. That is, we experience that sense of constriction that comes from ahava, from yirah rather, from fear. But the musical notation, which flows, suggests love. Because when we taste something good, when we sense pleasure in something, we love it. So we experience both the points and the flow of the music in order to have yira v'ahava in our Torah study and in everything that we do, that we're always aware of this constant flow of God's presence, which both is startling in the moment and saying, oh, how could I forget that God is present here? And it's also a moment of expansive love that we experience of the awareness of God's presence and divinity flowing in this thing in order to sustain us. V'zeyadu mamram, right? And now he goes back to he's taking us back to our opening verse. The sages taught, Ina v'liba tre sirsura dechata'a. Right? The eye and the heart are the go-betweens, the procurers, in our contemporary language, the pimps for sin. Ayin ro'ah, the eye sees, v'yidei lev chomed, and through that, the heart desires. V'gam zeh yadua, she'HaKadosh Baruch Hu imshich ta'anud b'chol davar gashmi, right? And we know that the Blessed Holy One brought delight into every material thing, kedei laha'alotan el tanug elyon. That delight is there for us in all of the material world. We're not to abstain from or abjure the physical world and its delights. We're meant to delight in them, but not solely for our own pleasure, not taking to them as our possession, as if we own it for our sake alone, but rather to raise up the awareness of delight, to participate in the supernal delight. That every delight that we have, our favorite ice cream, a beautiful sunset, a beloved companion, a treasured book, an inspiring poem, prayer, Torah, whatever it is that we engage in that brings us delight, we are to sense the delight that comes from it and to know that this is only a partial delight. One, because it's passing, right? Even if we eat the whole container of ice cream, that container will be done. Whatever it is, we finish the poem and we love it again, but we will turn to the next task. So all of these delights are passing, but knowing that delight is part of the universe, we can experience the yira that comes from, oh, will this delight pass, to the love that comes from, it is infinite when I connect to the infinite love, to the supernal delight. But the Yetzer Hara doesn't let us do that, to bring everything to God. But the Yetzer Hara wants to kill us through material delight. And I'd say that that's what we're doing, that we are killing ourselves through physical delights, whether it's what we consume physically or how we consume the material world just for our own sake, right? That is the work of the Yetzer Hara. And this work of the Yetzer Hara, he says, is called Gam. Shagam b'chol makom hu ribui. Right? Gam also is excess. It's the next thing. It's the next thing. Shemar belanu atanu gashmi, the Yetzer Hara increases our physical pleasures. Having more is what's delightful, the Yetzer Hara says. Oh, you like that? Have another. You like that? There's more here. Hey, kid, want a bite? Right? That's what it is. That's the Yetzer Hara from the Garden of Eden. Hatanug nikra kesef. Right? The Tanug is called kesef, which we often, it means silver, but also it can mean nichsof, nichsafta. You have definitely longed for this. You have longed for this. And he plays on the word kesef. So now we come. And here he does this amazing Hasidic reading of the words, right? Don't follow after your hearts and after your eyes, right? So he said, the eye sees and the heart desires. They are the procurers. They're the in-between. They're the pimp for the Yetzer Hara to get us to run after the Ta'anug Gashmi, the kesef, the silver that distracts us, the material that we always yearn for. And watch what he does. The Blessed Holy One warns us to only go not to, I think that should be lo latur, not ella, I'm sorry. Lo latur achar tanug lev achar chemdat ayin. Not to go after the delight of the heart and the pleasure of the eye. And chemda here is meant to point us back to the Garden of Eden. And that's what he comes to his Hasidic teaching, acharei levavchem, right? That is, acharei, after your hearts, that is the letters after lev. Don't follow after the letters that follow lev, because after the lamed is mem and after the bet is gimel, and if you put them together, they spell gam. Don't be seduced by more. The acharei nechem. Don't be seduced by that which comes after ayin, right? The letter ayin, the word for I, because after ayin comes pei, and after yud comes kaf, and after nun comes samich, and if you put them together, they spell kesef, right? Not to go after what the Yetzer Hara says, that we should increase in excess our desires for delights. That you follow after our lustful urge, that we go whoring after. This is really like, and it's analogous to, infidelity. Ne'uf is adultery, infidelity. Because we're betraying God. We are screwing around with God's possession, which is the world. We're taking it for ours when it really belongs elsewhere. But we have to raise all of our delights to God. When can we come to this degree, he asks? When we serve God with fear and love in the manner that we said above, where we begin with fear and recognize this belongs to God. There are limits. It's not mine. And then recognize, but yes, it's been given to me, and to receive it in love, and to experience the delight, and then to say, but wait, don't take it just for yourself. Remember where it comes from, and experience that Yira on a new level, in a new dimension, and then more love. When we begin first by cleaving to the fear, in that way we come to Ahava, Bichinat Zachar, right? As we had before, that male side. Asitem et. Right? The phrase is Asitem et kol mitzvotai. You will do all my commandments. But here, Asitem et, he includes et, the direct object, right? Shelo telchu b'chinat otiyot levad. So he's reading et as otiyot, the letters aleph to tav. Don't follow the letters alone, but you have to bring to them nikudot and ta'amim. You have to bring the points and the fluid melody. Bring the year on the ava to everything. Vezeu kol mitzvotai. And in that way, you'll be able to do all of my commandments. Kamosh tziviti lachem lamshich yirati v'avati b'chol otiyot. Right? In the same way that I commanded you to bring my love and fear into all of the letters, into all of the world, then you'll be able to fulfill all of my commandments. So what are all of my commandments? All of my commandments are those things that direct us to not going to excess, not extending beyond what I receive, not taking this delight to be my personal possession and what's due to me. Because after all, I bought the ice cream, it's mine. It's in my freezer, you can't come and take it. But where did it come from? Who produced it? How did it get here? And how did I come to have it in my freezer? Right? Because all of this is interconnected, because nothing is separate. That's the process that he's leading us to. That we constantly move in this dance of Yira and Ava, of fear and love. Fear and love. Fear, awareness of divinity, awareness of the immensity of all existence, awareness that we are not everything. That then generates love for the fact of our existence, that generates love for the world in its fullness, that then leads us, and in this amazing teaching, to be aware of Gam and Kesef, right? Kesef is money, right? That we are not to run after money. Money is only a means to an end, and that end should be to expand delight, for more people to experience delight, for there to be more delight and fullness in the world. And how do we do that? We do that by also holding back from Gam. Oh, I'll take this, and I'll take that. You know what? I'll take 6 of everything. Right? Why? What does that get us? What does the more bring to us? Will it actually make us feel more full? Will it actually enable us to feel more love? If I have one more pair of shoes, if I have one more car, if I have one more book, right? Will it make me smarter? Will it make people like me more? Is that really where the love comes from? The practice with Yira and Ava, he's suggesting, is practicing with the world and our place in it. How we relate to everything around us. How we understand our role and connection in the world. Yes, we are to be productive. Yes, we are to make use of the world. I said this a couple of weeks ago, I'm sure. Isaiah says, Lo tohu v'ra'ah. I think it's Isaiah. Lo tohu v'ra'ah. Lashevet bara'ah. God didn't create the world to be tohu, to be an abyss, to be a void. Lashevet bara'ah. God created it to be settled. And that means we have to use it. But we have to be careful in how we use it. We have to be cautious in how we use it and not use it to excess. There's much to be gained from physical delight. I'm not suggesting that we go back to Stalinist, realism, in our architecture and just build housing blocks that are blah and return to sort of 1984. I'm not suggesting that. But I do think that we have to be cautious in how we use materials, how we recycle. They're rebuilding a bridge nearby, just a simple car passenger bridge over a local parkway. Thank God they're replacing it. I wouldn't want a car for it to collapse and for anybody to get hurt, right? But it did, occur to me. I don't know what construction companies do with the lumber that they use to create the frames for the bridge. The bridge itself is its own shape. And I'm sure it was built to its own dimensions because not every highway is the same length across and the roads have to line up in a certain way. Everything has to be just right. But will the lumber wind up going into a dump? Will it be reused by the construction company? Just asking that question raises a possibility for us to practice some yirah, to say, oh, this is possible to use again for ahava, for the sake of greater expansiveness. That's what he's pointing us to, right? So my invitation to us is to delight in the world, to take joy in the fact that we are human, that we're alive, that we have consciousness, that we can be aware of our lives in our own particular way. And that in our delighting in the world, we experience this dance of yirah and ahava, and that we engage in it in such a way that we experience that yirah first for the sake of ahava that the Mahayana Chochmah suggests us. I suspect that that's already there for many of us, that we're already having some sense of yirah